In 1957, humanity left the planet for the first time. Within 12 years, we walked on the moon. Then somehow we stopped. This is the rise, the fall, and the strange rebirth of the space age. On October 4, 1957, a beeping metal sphere crossed the night sky. Sputnik, the Soviet Union had reached space first, and America was stunned. Then came the firsts. First animal, first man, first woman, first spacewalk. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth. For a few short years, the Soviets owned the heavens. But the moon slipped away. Their chief designer died on the operating table. The giant moon rocket, the N-1, exploded 4 times. America landed first, and yet the Soviets kept on launching. By 1982, the Soviet Union launched 101 rockets in a single year, 5 times more than America. A rocket every 3 days. It was a record that would stand for 40 years. Then, in 1991, the empire that built it all simply ceased to exist. The money vanished overnight. Engineers went unpaid. The greatest launch program in history began to crumble. Today, Russia launches fewer than 20 rockets a year. The nation that reached space first now trails both America and China. The first chapter of the space age was written in Russian. The next would be written in English. Humiliated by Sputnik, America answered with a blank check. NASA was born, and President Kennedy made a promise. A man on the moon before the decade was out. The money began to pour in. But the moon was a mountain, and America had to climb it step by step. Mercury put the first Americans in space. Gemini taught them to walk in the void, to find each other in orbit, to dock. Every skill the moon would demand was learned the hard way, one mission at a time. By 1966, NASA was consuming 4.4% of the entire federal budget. 1 in every $23 Washington spent went to space. 400,000 people worked to reach the moon. Then the dream burned. In January 1967, a flash fire swept through the Apollo 1 capsule during a routine test on the ground. Grissom, White, and Chaffee were gone in seconds. America had not yet left for the moon, and it had already paid in blood. In 1969, 2 Americans walked on the moon. The race was won, but victory was the problem. With the Soviets beaten, the reason to keep spending vanished. Even before the last Apollo flew, the budget was being cut. Plans for moon bases and Mars missions were quietly shelved. The last 3 Apollo flights were cancelled, their rockets turned into museum pieces. By the 80s, NASA's share of the budget had fallen below 1%. Today, NASA still does breathtaking things, the Webb telescope, the space station, but it does them on about 1/3 of 1% of the budget. The golden age of spending was over, and it never came back. The pitch was irresistible. A spaceplane that landed on a runway and flew again within weeks. Up to 50 flights a year. Space, as cheap and routine as catching a plane. It was the most ambitious machine NASA had ever attempted, and almost none of those promises would come true. If NASA could not have more money, it would try to spend less. The space shuttle was sold as a reusable spaceplane that would make spaceflight cheap and routine. By 1985, it flew 9 times in a single year. Then, on a cold January morning in 1986, 73 seconds after launch, Challenger tore itself apart. All 7 on board were killed, live on television. The fleet was grounded for nearly 3 years. And yet it flew on. The shuttle launched the Hubble telescope, which rewrote astronomy. It built the International Space Station, piece by piece. For 2 decades, it was the workhorse of human spaceflight. Then, in 2003, Columbia broke apart as it came home, just minutes from landing. 7 more astronauts were gone, 14 lives across 2 disasters. The dream of cheap, safe spaceflight was dead. After 30 years, 135 flights, and a cost of nearly $200 billion, the shuttle retired in 2011. And for the first time since Apollo, America could not launch its own astronauts at all. For 9 long years, the country that had won the moon paid its old rival, Russia, up to $90 million a seat just to reach the space station. The space age had not just stalled, it had gone into reverse. Then a private company did what governments could not. SpaceX learned to land its rockets and fly them again. The thing the shuttle had only promised, reusability, was suddenly real, and the cost of reaching orbit began to fall like a stone. In 2020, after 9 years, American astronauts once again rode an American rocket to orbit. The gap was closed, not by a government, but by a company that barely existed when the shuttle was still flying. And then the numbers went vertical. 61 launches, then 98, then more than 130 in a single year, shattering the Soviet record that had stood for 4 decades. By one measure, the space age is busier now than it has ever been. Most of those rockets were carrying its own creation. Starlink, a swarm of internet satellites, thousands of them, launched in just a few years. Today, more than half of every working satellite around the Earth belongs to a single company. No government had ever come close. And rising over Texas now is something bigger still. Starship, the largest and most powerful rocket ever built, twice the thrust of the Saturn V. In 2024, its enormous booster flew to the edge of space and was caught out of the sky by the launch tower. It is being built openly to carry people to Mars. While America fell and rose again, a third power was climbing quietly. China launched its first satellite in 1970, its first astronaut in 2003. Then, in 2018, China launched more rockets than any other nation on Earth. A new challenger had arrived. American law had barred China from the International Space Station, so China built its own. In 2021, the Tiangong station rose into orbit, and it has been crewed by Chinese astronauts ever since. Shut out of the club, they simply built a new one. And China went where no one had gone. In 2019, its Chang robot became the first craft ever to land on the far side of the moon, the hidden face we never see. It brought moon rocks home. Then, in 2024, it returned the first samples ever taken from that far side. It was no longer a contest between two giants. In 2023, India landed a craft near the moon's south pole, the first nation ever to reach it, and did the whole mission for less than the cost of a Hollywood film. The space age had gone global. And the greatest prize is back on the table. America's Artemis program has already flown a capsule around the moon and means to land astronauts there once more. China has vowed to put its own people on the surface by 2030. For the first time since Apollo, 2 superpowers are racing for the moon. It began with a single beeping sphere and a fear that one side would own the sky. It fell into decades of drift. Now there are more rockets, more nations, and more ambition than at any time in history. The space age never really ended. It was only waiting to begin again. So here is the question. We reached the moon in 1969, then barely left orbit for 50 years. Did we waste the space age? Or, after a long and painful fall, is it only now truly beginning? Tell me what you think below.